Tennis is a sport full of unforgettable moments. Most of them happen on the court, under the lights, in front of thousands of fans. But some of the most powerful moments happen away from the cameras, in the quiet spaces between the matches, where no one is watching and no one is performing. What happened beneath Hard Rock Stadium in Miami was one of those moments, and it changed the way a lot of people think about tennis, about money, and about what it really means to fight for something bigger than yourself. If you want to stay updated on stories like this one, the ones that go beyond the scores and the rankings and get to the heart of what this sport is really about, make sure you subscribe to Court Legacy. Hit the bell so you never miss a video. Now let's get into it. AlexEala had just walked off the court after a painful fourth-round loss to Karolina Muchova at the Miami Open. The score was 6-2, 6-2. It was not close. It was the kind of loss that stings not just because of the result, but because of what the result means. For Eala, that loss extended a streak that had been haunting her for a while now. Against Czech players, she had now gone 0-13. 13 matches, 0 wins. That is a pattern that would frustrate any professional tennis player, no matter how talented or how mentally strong they are. The loss also cost her in the rankings. Before Miami, she had been sitting at number 29 in the world, a remarkable position for a 20-year-old from the Philippines who had only recently broken onto the international scene. After the loss to Muchova, she dropped to number 45. In tennis, ranking points matter enormously. They determine which tournaments you get into, what seedings you receive, and how much prize money you can expect to earn. Dropping 16 spots in a single tournament is a significant setback, and Eala knew it. She had earned $15,720 for reaching the fourth round. To put that in perspective, it was more money than she had earned in her entire career before her 2025 breakthrough in Miami. A year earlier, she had gone much further in the same tournament and taken home $332,160. So by her own recent standards, this was a step back. The check in her hand represented hard work, real talent, and a deep level of professional dedication. But it also represented a fraction of what the tournament's biggest earners were taking home. The Miami Open's total prize pool that year was $9,414,725. The champion, Aryna Sabalenka, earned $1,151,380. The runner-up took home $612,340. Semifinalists received $340,190 each. Quarterfinalists earned $193,645. In the players who fell in the fourth round, players like Eala, like Muchova, like Naomi Osaka, earned $15,720. That is not a typo. The champion earned more than 73 times what a fourth-round finisher took home from the same tournament. Both players had to qualify, travel, train, and compete at the highest level of the sport, but the reward for making it to the fourth round was less than 2% of what the champion received. Eala had been thinking about these numbers for a while. She had been watching the broader conversation in women's tennis unfold over recent months. The players had been organizing. They had been talking publicly about the gap between what they earn and what the tournaments make. They had been pushing for a seat at the table, for a fairer share of the revenue that their talent and hard work generates. And Eala, despite being just 20 years old and still in the early stages of her professional career, had been paying close attention. She had watched Sabalenka speak at the Australian Open about the need for better financial distribution. She had heard Coco Gauff point out that while the Australian Open had increased its prize pool to $111.5 million Australian dollars, a 16% jump from the previous year, the percentage of total revenue going to players was still not where it needed to be. Gauff had been direct about it. From her understanding, the increase in prize money was real, but the percentage compared to overall revenue was still short of where the players felt it should be. She made clear that further conversations needed to happen, not just with the Australian Open, but with all 4 Grand Slams. Sabalenka had echoed that sentiment in her own way. She acknowledged that the slams were trying to work with the players and find a resolution, and she expressed hope that one day they would reach a place that felt fair for everyone. But hope is not the same as action, and the players had already moved beyond hoping. They had moved into organizing. In March 2025, the players sent a formal letter to the organizers of all 4 Grand Slams. The letter laid out their demands clearly. They wanted increased prize money, they wanted investment in player benefit programs, including maternity support for players who wanted to have children without sacrificing their careers, and they wanted a meaningful seat at the decision-making table, not just a consultation that could be ignored, but a real voice in how the sport was run and how its revenues were distributed. A second letter followed in July of the same year. The conversations were happening, but they were moving slowly, and the players were growing impatient.
Into this environment walked AlexEala, fresh off her loss, carrying a check for $15,720 and thinking about what she could do. When she spotted Sabalenka walking toward her in the tunnel beneath Hard Rock Stadium, the world #1 had just come off a quarterfinal victory that extended her winning streak to 11 matches. She was the defending Miami Open champion. She had just completed the so-called Sunshine Double, winning both Indian Wells and Miami back-to-back, which is one of the most impressive achievements in the early part of the tennis season. She was at the height of her powers, confident, focused, and preparing for what she hoped would be a deep run in the semifinals. She was not expecting what happened next. Eala did not wait for the cameras. She did not ask for a microphone or call a press conference. She simply walked up to Sabalenka, reached into her bag, and pulled out her prize money check. She extended it toward the world #1 and said, very simply, that it was for the players, for all of them. She told Sabalenka to use it however she thought would help in the fight for what the players deserved. Sabalenka froze. She looked at the check. She looked at Eala's face. She searched for any sign that this was some kind of joke. There was none. She asked, almost in a whisper, if Eala was serious. Eala told her she was. She told Sabalenka that she had been fighting this fight longer than Eala had. She mentioned Sabalenka's public statements at the Australian Open. She told her that the players had been watching, that they all had been watching, and that it was time to do something real. She said Sabalenka should use the money for travel to meetings, for legal costs, for whatever was needed. She just wanted her to keep fighting. Sabalenka reached out and took the check. Her hands were shaking slightly. She pulled Eala into an embrace that lasted long enough for a photographer at the far end of the tunnel to capture the moment. Within hours, that photograph was everywhere. It showed the world #1 and the 20-year-old from the Philippines holding each other, connected not by rivalry but by a shared understanding of what the sport owed its players and what the players owed each other. The image spread across social media faster than almost anything the tennis world had seen that year. In the photograph, Sabalenka's expression is difficult to describe simply. It's a mixture of shock and something deeper, something that looks like recognition or gratitude or the weight of a responsibility she had not asked for but was not going to turn away from. That evening, after her quarterfinal win, Sabalenka sat down for her press conference. The journalists came straight to the point. They had seen the photograph. They wanted to know what had happened in the tunnel. Was it true that Eala had given her prize money check? Sabalenka paused before answering. When she spoke, her voice was quieter than usual. She confirmed that it was true. She described how Eala had walked up to her after losing, after dropping in the rankings, and had simply handed over the check. She told the room that Eala had said to use it to fight for all of them. She paused again, visibly working to compose herself, and then said that she had not known what to say in that moment and still did not quite know. She spoke about how hard Eala had worked to earn that money, how she had sold out stadiums, how she had brought so many new fans to the sport, and then she had just given it away, without hesitation, without asking for anything in return. A reporter asked if Sabalenka planned to keep the money. Her answer was immediate. No, absolutely not. She said she would use it exactly as Eala had asked, putting it toward the players' collective efforts, the meetings with tournament organizers, the legal costs, whatever the players needed to ensure that the people who make tennis what it is get paid a fair share of what they help create. She smiled, a little sadly, and said that Eala was 20 years old and already thinking about the future of the sport, already thinking about the players who would come after her. Then she repeated what Eala had said to her, that Sabalenka had been fighting this fight longer than she had, but that after that day in the tunnel, they were all going to be fighting together. AlexEala said nothing publicly. She had already left Miami and was on her way back to the Philippines for a short break before the clay season began. Her management team released a brief statement confirming that the gesture had taken place, but offering no further comment. The statement said simply that Eala was focused on recovery and preparation for the clay season and had no comment on matters outside her control. The silence was its own kind of message. She had never needed the spotlight. She had never chased attention or asked to become a symbol. She played tennis, and the world had come to watch her, and when she saw a moment to do something that mattered, she did it, without waiting for permission or recognition. Earlier in the year, Eala had spoken with Andy Roddick on the Served podcast about her sudden rise to prominence. She was thoughtful and honest about it. She said that it was hard to see yourself as someone with that much influence when nothing about who you are as a person had really changed. Her success had grown rapidly, and she was grateful for it, but she was still the same person. She talked about noticing week by week and tournament by tournament that the crowds were getting bigger. She saw the videos of the lines outside the stadiums, the fans waiting for hours just to watch her play, and she said she had been genuinely surprised. She admitted to being in a kind of denial at first, but every week the people kept coming.
She also talked about how she tried to manage the weight of all that attention. She said that if she could master knowing when to be confident and when to be humble and grateful, that would be a good recipe for everything. She wanted to compete at the highest level on the court while remaining aware of what she represented off it. What she represented was on full display in that tunnel in Miami. Here was a 20-year-old who had just lost, who had just seen her ranking drop by 16 spots, who had just earned a paycheck that would have been life-changing for her family not long ago, and instead of holding on to it, she handed it to a player who had earned more than 10 times as much in the same tournament, not for cameras, not for credit, but because she had decided that the fight for something larger than herself was worth more than any individual prize. Eala's gesture did not happen in a vacuum. It was the most visible and personal act in a movement that had been building for months, driven by some of the most respected names in the sport. The players had been organizing collectively, writing letters, attending meetings, and speaking publicly about the gap between what they generate for the sport and what comes back to them. They had been asking questions that were uncomfortable for tournament organizers to answer. Why are players who sell out venues and attract global audiences seeing such a small percentage of the revenue their work creates? Why does the champion earn more than 70 times what a fourth-round finisher earns from the same event? Why are players who want to have children and then return to the tour not given adequate support to do so? These were not abstract questions. They were questions about the day-to-day reality of professional tennis, about whether the sport was truly valuing the athletes who make it possible. Eala's gesture put a human face on those questions. It showed what was at stake, not in percentages and prize pool figures, but in the very real decision of a young woman choosing to give away money she had earned because she believed the fight was more important. Sabalenka understood the history she was now part of. Women in tennis have been fighting battles like this one for a long time. Billie Jean King fought for equal prize money and helped found the WTA. Venus Williams pushed for equal pay at Wimbledon. Generations of players have argued, organized, and sacrificed to make the sport more equitable and more sustainable. The fight for fairer revenue sharing is the latest chapter in that story, and now a 20-year-old from the Philippines had written herself into it in a way no one had anticipated. After Miami, both players turned their attention to what came next. Sabalenka's run at the tournament ended in the semifinals, where she lost to Aryna Sabalenka in a rematch of their Indian Wells final. It was a disappointing conclusion for the world number one, but she had time to rest before the clay season began. She would head to Madrid, then Rome, then Roland Garros, the tournament where she was still searching for her first title and the one significant piece of her career resume that remained unfilled. Eala prepared for the Upper Austria Ladies Linz Open, a WTA 500 event beginning April 6th. It would be her first clay court tournament of the season, her first chance to begin rebuilding the ranking points she had lost in Miami, and her first step toward proving that what she had done at the Miami Open, both on the court and off it, was not a one-time thing. The Czech curse was still unbroken, 0 wins in 13 matches against Czech players. That is a specific and frustrating problem that she would need to solve eventually. The ranking points would need to come back. The clay season was unfamiliar territory, though she had trained at the Rafa Nadal Academy, which gave her a foundation to work from. There were challenges ahead, real and significant ones, but she carried something with her that cannot be measured in ranking points or prize pool figures. She had done something in a tunnel in Miami that reminded an entire sport what it is supposed to be about. She had looked at a check that represented her own hard work and her family's security and decided that the collective future of women's tennis was worth more than any of that. And she had made that decision quietly, without a press conference, without a sponsor, without any expectation of reward. Sabalenka made a promise at her press conference. She would use the money exactly as Eala had asked. She would carry it into every room where the future of the sport was being decided. She would not let anyone forget what had happened and what it meant. She said she would make sure the people who run tennis understand that the players who fill their stadiums and drive their revenues deserve a fair share of what they help create. Eala walked out of Hard Rock Stadium after a loss. She dropped in the rankings, she gave away her prize money, and she left Miami having done something that no victory on the court could have accomplished, reminding the world that tennis is bigger than any one match, any one tournament, or any one player's career. It is a community, and the best thing any player can do for that community is fight for it, even when it costs something real. That is what a 20-year-old from the Philippines did in a tunnel in Miami, and no one who was watching is likely to forget it. If this story moved you, share it with someone who loves tennis, and if you want more stories like this one, stories that go deeper than the scores and get to what the sport really means, subscribe to Court Legacy and hit the bell. We are here every day, and every day is match point.